Hi everybody. I'm writing this as somewhat of a warning, but also a slight cry for help. I do not know who else to turn to that may take me seriously, and I know this community is often eager to help out in a situation like this. A few months ago in late July, I attended a music festival with my girlfriend Debbie. And this particular festival was in a small Wisconsin town called Twin Lakes. It went on from Thursday until past midnight on Sunday. So by the time we had left the last show and walked through the mud, packed up the last of our belongings from the campsite and drove past the stampede of fellow festival goers, it was pretty late. Her and I have attended this festival for the past 4 years. It's pretty much common knowledge amongst the community, and that cell phone service is completely gone after the first day. I think it's a combination of being in a small town and randomly filling a small area with thousands of people. It must cause the service to dissipate so quickly. Because we were fully aware of this, we expected to not have use of our phone's GPS system to help us navigate back to town. And this really didn't worry us though because, like I had said, this was our 4th time attending the festival and we pretty much knew the route back to town. Unfortunately, the usual way we were prepared to take was completely blocked off. We saw flashing red and blue lights in the distance, and later learned one of the festival goers had been struck by a vehicle. After waiting for 20 minutes and not moving an inch, Debbie and I agreed that we should try and find another way back. We pulled a U-turn and began to drive in the opposite direction. After a few minutes we saw a side street and we decided that we'd try it out. And this road, well, it was pretty dark. Actually really dark. The kind of dark where you drive slow and blare your high beams, which is what I did. And being into horror films, I took the opportunity to make a comment on our creepy surroundings to Debbie. She kind of laughed, but I noticed the fear in her voice and eyes. And being the loving guy I am, I decided I would take advantage of her fear and scare her even more. And boyfriend of the year, am I right? I switched from the auxiliary settings in the car to the radio and immediately switched to AM. I scanned one by one until I found one that was just playing white noise. I left it on and began making comments to Debbie in different horror-inspired voices. Things like, "They're watching us tonight," and "Tonight seems like a nice night to die, don't you think?" The crazy thing was, Debbie wasn't finding my hilarious jokes very entertaining, and kept on trying to shut the radio off. What a buzzkill. I agreed to cut the act, and I told her it can all end if she just played along a little bit, by choosing one random AM station for us to listen to. With an annoyed sigh, Debbie reached over and spun the dial with little thought, and the station she landed on was AM 630. She hit the spooky jackpot with that one. What we heard could only be described as a little girl singing with a high-pitched, distorted voice. I immediately began laughing at her selection, since it was exactly what I was hoping we'd find and so much more. I whipped out my phone and recorded a Snapchat video for our reactions. I'll link it below. I continued to laugh while Debbie nervously chuckled. I actually found it a bit strange and a little unnerving myself, but I didn't want to let it show in front of her, trying to hold up the macho guy routine and all that. I went ahead and I switched back to the aux and I continued our drive home. A few minutes after switching back, the music got cut off once again, and my high-pitched ringtone flooded the car with its ear-piercing jingle. The number was strange and it told me it was from Russia, so I just ignored it. I had recently purchased a URL from GoDaddy and I made the foolish decision to not make it private, so my mobile number was made public for all the spammers to find it. And that meant receiving calls from randomly generated numbers becoming a common occurrence. Which is why this one didn't really faze me much. It did a little though. Most of the spam numbers I'd received were domestic, and were usually received during weekday afternoons. I had never received one at almost 1 AM on a Sunday night, let alone from Russia. And not too long after rejecting that call, I received another. Again, it was an international number, but this time from Morocco. I figured it was the same person as before, using the same random number generator, and I once again ignored it. A few minutes passed when, you guessed it, another call came. And this one though was in fact domestic, and the call was coming from Phoenix, Arizona. Since this was from inside the US and I was finally angry enough to answer and chew out the solicitor on the other end, I picked up. I really wish that I didn't. I angrily asked, "Hello?" several times and I did not receive an answer. Usually that would be my cue to hang up, but I was annoyed and felt persistent. And not to mention Debbie was watching and, the macho guy routine. I knew somebody else was there, because I was able to hear some background static and the faint sound of somebody breathing. "Hey asshole, I know you're there. What do you want? What can you possibly be trying to sell at this hour?" And the silence lingered for a few more seconds before it was broken. I began hearing music, but not just any music. It was the same style of music we had heard on the creepy radio station we had turned off just before receiving the calls. I felt my face get flushed and I sort of just froze up, phone still on my ear. I don't know how long I sat there like that before I was snapped out of it. I hadn't realized what had snapped me out of it until Debbie broke the silence in the car. What does he want?" I looked into the rearview mirror and I saw what Debbie was referring to. There was a pickup truck tailgating behind us that had flashed its lights. The driver did it again, just one quick burst of their high beams in our direction. I had no idea what they could have wanted. I was going about 5 to 10 miles over the speed limit, so it wasn't because I was impeding traffic. It was a 2-lane road with no oncoming traffic, so even if they were in a hurry, they could have easily gone around us and sped up. At this point, I was still on the phone, and still had not heard anything but the music coming from the other end. For whatever reason, I didn't hang up. I was too distracted by the tailgater to try and pry more information from the caller. After about 30 seconds of being dangerously close to our car, the truck finally began to switch lanes in an attempt to pass us. It was dark, so I couldn't see into the driver's car through the windshield, and when they were beside us, we realized their windows were tinted very dark, and definitely past the legal limit. At that moment, I didn't think much of it. I assumed that they would just speed past us and be out of our hair soon. But that didn't happen. The truck got in front of us and slowly began to apply their brakes. Red flags everywhere. I had read enough stories of criminal encounters to know this easily could be a trap to rob us, or even worse. I knew that I had to be tactical to avoid any problems. Debbie, on the other hand, wasn't thinking so clearly. Feeling tired, anxious to be home, and now annoyed to her breaking point by this driver, she swiftly reached out her arm and pressed down firmly on my car horn. It wasn't the first time she had pulled this move, and it's something she does and I absolutely hate. I always tell her she's going to get us into some serious confrontation one day. A serious confrontation that will have to be handled by me, so I'm usually quick to grab her hand and remove it from the horn. This time though, I was frozen. I was still on the phone with the mysterious caller at this point, subconsciously transfixed on the chilling audio that was radiating in my ear. From the phone, I heard it. It was my car horn. It was delayed by a nanosecond and sounded far away, but I knew that it was the same. I could hear it coming from the other end of the call. Whoever is in that truck was the person that I was currently speaking to, and the person who had called us with the suspicious numbers. The person who was playing the same radio station we had randomly discovered. And now, the same person who almost got us to come to a complete stop in the middle of a Wisconsin back road at 1 in the morning. Fight or flight is a funny thing. It's very impressive how fast your mind can actually process information when it's fueled by fear. In what felt like a blink of an eye, my mind came up with the possibility of reaching for the baseball bat I kept in the back seat and coming at the driver with all my might. That fantasy, though, quickly went south, as I pictured a group of grown men with guns spilling out of the truck, killing me and doing God knows what to Debbie. I thank God to this day that the stupid Macho Man routine came to an end right then and there. I quickly and haphazardly slammed on the gas and swerved around the truck, picking up as much speed as I could. I might not have the fastest car in the world, but it's in pretty good shape. It was more than enough to escape the old, worn-out pickup truck that was following us. After about 10 minutes of speeding well past the legal limit, blowing stop signs and living out all my Vin Diesel fantasies, we were back in the more sprawling, busy areas of the road. There was no sign of the truck. Debbie, who was screaming at me for the first few minutes of this escape, was reduced to quiet crying as she clutched a pillow tight to her chest. My adrenaline had now worn off and I was feeling shaky. We had been riding in dead silence this whole time, so I reached down to the floor of the car for my phone. I figured that we both could probably benefit in some cheery music to help lighten the mood, since we both clearly were not eager to discuss what had just happened. I grabbed the phone and I tapped the home button. The screen was illuminated, and I saw that I was still in the middle of a call. I had never hung up the phone before speeding away, and apparently neither did the mysterious caller on the other end. I approached a red light and I slowed down to a stop, and that's when I put the phone to my ear. My breathing was undoubtedly audible at this point. At first, I was met with silence, other than the same muted white noise as before. The silence was broken by the caller, and in a deep voice I heard one sentence that filled my body with a nauseating chill. "I almost had you." And then the call ended. I must have looked shaken, because Debbie nervously asked me what was wrong. I simply shook my head without a word and I continued driving. About 30 minutes later, we had arrived home. At that point, we were so exhausted that we walked inside, decided to leave unpacking the car for the next day, and dropped into the bed without even bothering with showers. And the next morning, I grabbed the keys and I went to go bring the car closer to the apartment entrance in order to speed up the process of emptying all our camping gear. I got to the car, and when I hit the unlock button on the keys, I did not hear the sound of the doors unlocking. Instead, I heard the dull thud of the locks remaining the same. In our tired days the night prior, we had neglected to lock the doors. I peeked inside the car and saw that everything seemed to still be there, including some cash that was visibly strewn across the passenger seat. I figured that we had gotten lucky and I proceeded to get inside. Right away, I knew something was wrong. It was the smell. Whether you know it or not, every single person has a scent. You can smell it when you walk into certain homes, or smelling somebody's worn clothing. In that moment, I was picking up a scent that did not belong to Debbie or me. It wasn't bad per se, but it was undeniable, slightly musky with a hint of menthol. I got out of the car and I inspected it once more. Again, nothing seemed out of place. I took a breath and I told myself I was just imagining things. Once again, I climbed into the driver's seat, this time ignoring the unusual smell. I stuck my key in the ignition and I fired up the car. I almost jumped out of my skin when the radio began to blare. I could have sworn that we had turned it off, but hell, I thought we had locked the doors too. It wasn't the radio being on that scared me. It was the fact that the radio was on its loudest setting, and it was programmed to AM 630. I could almost hear my heart beating rapidly as I stared wide-eyed at the console. I knew for a fact that we had switched it to the aux setting. I just knew it. The radio station was no longer playing the haunting sounds as the night prior, and was now projecting the sounds of some obscure talk radio or news channel. At that point, I did not have enough energy to deal with this any longer. I turned off the radio and I drove the car up to our building entrance, and Debbie was waiting there for me. We both looked exhausted. Without speaking very much, her and I worked together to empty the car. I parked it back in our spots and that was that. There were no more weird phone calls, other than just the usual spam, and no strange discoveries with the car, the radio station, etc. I would tune into the station a few times and find that it was still the same boring news channel. Since Debbie and I lived in Chicago, I figured that it made sense that it would change. Things just went back to normal. That is, until last week. It started when I checked my phone in the middle of my lunch break at work. I had 4 missed calls, all from random numbers. The last one was the same Phoenix number I had picked up on the way back from Wisconsin. That number had left a voicemail. In the voicemail, as you may have guessed, was more of the creepy music we had heard that night. There were no other sounds or voices, just that damn music. Since then, I had noticed a lot of cars with Wisconsin license plates. It's probably just all in my head. I know, cars from neighboring states is nothing crazy. but it just seemed like there were way more than usual, parked around our apartment, driving past me on the street, and so on. I would probably be able to brush all this off if it wasn't for what had happened yesterday. I was getting out of a meeting at work and I checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls. 2 from random numbers, again nothing super unusual, and 1 from Debbie. She had left a voicemail, and upon playing it, I almost threw up my lunch. It was the eerie music. I called her right away and she picked up after the first ring. She asked normally and I began to ask her what the voicemail was all about. At this point, I figured she was just playing a prank on me this whole time, and just forgot to mask her number before making that particular call. I demanded she confess it was her, and when she finally started to cry while denying it all, I relented. I apologized for screaming at her. I explained everything that was happening for the past week, and I ended it all with her call and voicemail. It was quiet on her end. When she finally spoke, the adamant fear in her voice began to make sense. She explained to me that she couldn't have made that call. She had been running errands and had been grocery shopping at a local mega chain supermarket. In a rush to stay on schedule, she had forgotten her phone in the car. I don't know what to do. A small part of me still suspects she may be playing a very long practical joke on me, but she has never been the type to prank. And even if she was, how could she have orchestrated the radio station or the pickup truck? It just doesn't add up. All I know is that I haven't let my guard down for a while. I'm carrying a knife on me and I'm looking into getting my conceal and carry license ASAP. I'm going to insist Debbie does the same. She's not a big fan of guns, so if she is behind this, maybe that'll be what makes her confess. Has anybody in the southern Wisconsin area by any chance had experience with this radio station? If not, please do not access it. I can't be sure the station itself has any connection to what's been happening, but why risk it? I'm scared and I just hope that this ends soon.